release of the Epstein files. Now, the Justice Department failed to put out all the documents today. The agency says it needs more time to go through the files to protect the ongoing investigation. Now, tonight we are seeing new images of high-profile celebrities in the documents without any context.
This is what happened when Michael Jackson's name showed up in the newly released Epstein files. The U.S. Department of Justice dropped thousands of pages of documents on December 19, 2025, and Jackson's name was in them. But the actual facts tell a very different story from what you've probably seen in headlines. Let me walk you through what was actually found, what it means, and what it doesn't mean, because right now there's a ton of misinformation everywhere, and people are making assumptions based on headlines that don't match reality.
Convicted sex offender Jeffrey Epstein and his girlfriend, Ghislaine Maxwell, each with high-profile figures, from late pop star Michael Jackson and billionaire Richard Branson to former President Bill Clinton, lounging in a hot tub. In this photo, Clinton is...
So first, we need to talk about where these files even came from and why they're being released now. President Trump signed the Epstein Files Transparency Act on November 19, 2025, which gave Attorney General Pam Bondi exactly 30 days to release unclassified records related to Jeffrey Epstein. 30 days later, on December 19th, the Department of Justice released thousands of pages of documents, and these included contact lists, photographs, depositions, witness testimonies, and various records tied to Epstein's activities and connections over the years. Michael Jackson's name appears in them, and here's the part that gets lost in all the noise and all the viral tweets and TikToks. The DOJ put out an explicit statement saying that inclusion in the files does not necessarily imply wrongdoing. Being in these files doesn't mean someone did something wrong, and that distinction matters more than anything else I'm about to tell you.
They include photos, flight logs, grand jury testimony, and a lot of heavy redactions. Among the photos is this one of pop superstar Michael Jackson with Epstein, and this dinner photo showing Mick Jagger and former President.
The Department of Justice knew that people would see famous names and immediately jump to conclusions, which is why they made this clarification front and center when they released the documents. But of course, that nuance gets lost when you're scrolling through social media and seeing headline after headline suggesting that everyone mentioned in these files must be guilty of something. So, what did they actually find with Jackson's name attached? 3 things, and I'm going to list them because they represent the complete picture of what's in these documents about Michael Jackson. Photographs exist showing Michael Jackson with Jeffrey Epstein, Bill Clinton, and Diana Ross, though nobody knows when these were taken, where they were taken, or what the context was for these pictures. Jackson's name also appears in Epstein's contact book, which is just an address list and not a client list, or proof of anything illegal, just a collection of phone numbers and addresses that Epstein kept.
To see it in writing and to know that they had this document this entire time, and how many people were harmed after that date, it just, we've been saying it over and over, but to see it in black and white that way has been very emotional.
Then there's a deposition from May 18, 2016, where a witness who was one of Epstein's accusers said she met Michael Jackson at Epstein's Palm Beach house. But when asked directly during questioning if she gave Jackson a massage, she said no. No allegations against him appear in this testimony. She met him there, shook his hand or said hello or whatever the interaction was, and that's the extent of what she said under oath. That's everything. Those are the only 3 mentions of Michael Jackson in thousands of pages of documents that detail Epstein's network, his activities, his properties, and the people who moved through his circles over decades. Now, you might be wondering why Michael Jackson would even know Jeffrey Epstein or show up at his house in the first place, because that's a fair question. The context here actually explains a lot, and it has everything to do with money. During the early 2000s, Jackson was dealing with serious financial problems, and despite owning music publishing rights worth an absolute fortune, including the Beatles catalog, which was worth hundreds of millions of dollars, he had major debts, and his cash flow was a complete mess. Financial experts who've analyzed this period in Jackson's life say he was reaching out to wealthy people for advice, trying to figure out how to manage his assets better and get his finances under control, and that's where Epstein comes in. Before his crimes became public and before his arrest, Epstein presented himself as a wealthy financier who spent time around celebrities, political leaders, and influential business people. He cultivated an image of being connected and powerful, someone who could open doors and provide financial guidance to people who needed it. Plenty of famous people crossed paths with him in social and professional settings during this time, and the most likely explanation based on the available information is that Jackson knew him through financial networking at a time when he desperately needed that kind of guidance.
Friday's release also includes hundreds of thousands of documents, including the first known complaint in 1996 when a woman accused Epstein of participating in child pornography. That woman claiming Epstein stole photos she took of her younger sisters, aged 12 and 16.
Jackson was looking for people who understood wealth management and investment strategies, and Epstein positioned himself as exactly that kind of person to celebrities and public figures who might benefit from his connections. And here's something that puts all of this in perspective and shows you just how many people knew Epstein before everything came to light. Michael Jackson is nowhere near the only public figure whose name shows up in these documents. Bill Clinton appears extensively in photos throughout the files. Diana Ross is there, along with Mick Jagger, Kevin Spacey, Chris Tucker, Sarah Ferguson, Walter Cronkite, Richard Branson, and Naomi Campbell, whose name gets mentioned in notes and records. These are actors, musicians, royalty, journalists, business moguls, and politicians from different eras and different industries, all connected to Epstein in various ways through his social and professional network. Legal experts and journalists covering this release have been really clear about one thing, and they keep repeating it because people keep ignoring it. You cannot interpret the presence of a name or photograph as evidence of criminal involvement without verified context, and photographs by themselves don't prove illicit conduct by the people in them. Before his crimes became public knowledge, Jeffrey Epstein knew a lot of powerful, famous, and influential people, and he made it his business to know them. Knowing him, appearing in a photo with him, or having your phone number in his contact book doesn't make all of them complicit in what he did or aware of what he was doing behind closed doors. That's a hard truth for people to accept because we want simple answers and clear villains, but the reality is more complicated than that. Now, let's flip this around and talk about what's missing from these files about Michael Jackson, because this matters just as much as what's included. No allegations of wrongdoing by Jackson appear anywhere in these thousands of pages. There's no evidence suggesting Jackson was a client of Epstein in any criminal sense. No testimony accusing him of misconduct or inappropriate behavior. No flight logs showing Jackson on Epstein's private plane traveling to his properties. And the photographs that do exist don't come with context, dates, or explanations about what event they were taken at, or why these people were together.
A partial batch of the Jeffrey Epstein files missing today's legally binding deadline for all of the documents. The release includes many previously released files in addition to thousands of newly released photos and a lot of blank pages too.
Michael Jackson died in June 2009, which was 16 years before these files came out. And Jeffrey Epstein died in jail in August 2019 while awaiting trial on federal charges. Jackson has been gone for over a decade and a half. He can't defend himself, can't provide context for these photos or these connections, and can't explain what his relationship with Epstein actually consisted of, or how many times they even spoke. We're left with fragments of information that don't add up to much of anything concrete. But in the absence of context, people fill in the blanks with their worst assumptions. And that's not fair to anyone, especially someone who's been dead for 16 years and can't speak for themselves. And that's where things get really frustrating, because the way this information has been handled online is frankly irresponsible. The second these files dropped on December 19th, social media lit up with headlines screaming things like, "Michael Jackson exposed in Epstein files," or "Michael Jackson caught in Epstein documents." And those headlines are completely misleading and designed to make you think something scandalous was uncovered. Jackson wasn't exposed doing anything wrong, wasn't caught in any criminal act, and his name simply appears in a contact list while photos show him with Epstein at some unknown point in time. One person testified they met him at Epstein's house once, and that's the full story, but you wouldn't know that from the way it's being talked about online. Sensational headlines get clicks, they get shares, they go viral. And while they're doing all that, they create a totally false impression that something terrible got uncovered when the actual evidence shows nothing like that at all. This hits different because Michael Jackson already faced serious allegations while he was alive. A trial in 2005 ended with his acquittal on child molestation charges after a lengthy legal process, and he denied allegations throughout his life, maintaining his innocence until the day he died. Now, 16 years after his death, his name gets dragged into another scandal. Not because anyone's accusing him of anything new, not because any victims have come forward with allegations, but just because his name sits in someone else's contact book and he appears in some photos. The timing of all this matters too, because Jackson can't respond. He can't give interviews explaining the context. He can't release statements through his lawyers. He's just a name in a file being discussed by millions of people who are making up their minds based on incomplete information and misleading headlines.
There's no effort to hold anything back because there's the name Donald J. Trump or anybody else's name, Bill Clinton's name, Reid Hoffman's name. There's no effort to hold back or not hold back because of that.
So why am I spending 15 minutes breaking all of this down and going through every detail? Because truth matters, context matters, and when information spreads instantly across every platform, and headlines exist purely to provoke emotional reactions and get engagement, we have a responsibility to look deeper and ask harder questions. When a headline says someone got exposed or caught, we need to ask what they were exposed doing and what they were caught doing, and then we need to actually look at the evidence instead of just accepting the framing we're given. The evidence here is that Michael Jackson knew Jeffrey Epstein, probably through professional or social circles related to financial matters in the early 2000s when Jackson needed help managing his wealth. That's what the files show, and anything beyond that is speculation. Does this mean we should ignore the Epstein files or dismiss their importance? Absolutely not, and I want to be really clear about that. These documents matter tremendously. They shed light on Epstein's network, his victims' experiences, the scope of his crimes, and potentially other people who were involved in what he was doing or who looked the other way. That investigative work is absolutely necessary, and journalists and law enforcement need to keep digging into these connections to get justice for the people Epstein hurt. But we also can't let these files turn into a weapon to smear anyone whose name appears in them, especially when there are no allegations against them, and especially when that person has been dead for 16 years and can't defend themselves or provide context. We need to be able to hold both of these ideas at the same time, that the Epstein files are important and that not everyone mentioned in them is guilty of something. So here's where we land after looking at all the facts. Michael Jackson's name appears in the Epstein files that came out on December 19, 2025. A contact list includes him. Some photographs show him with Epstein and other celebrities at some unknown time and place, and a witness testified to meeting him once at Epstein's house, but made no allegations about him. There are no allegations of wrongdoing in these files. The Department of Justice explicitly said that appearing in these files doesn't imply guilt of any kind, and legal experts have been urging the public not to jump to conclusions based on contact lists and photographs alone. The truth is usually less sensational than the headlines want you to believe, but the truth is what actually matters when we're talking about someone's reputation and legacy. If this breakdown helped clear things up and gave you a more complete picture of what's actually in these files, let me know in the comments. And if you've seen misleading headlines about these documents or about Michael Jackson specifically, take this as a reminder to always dig deeper before you share or believe something just because it sounds shocking or because it confirms what you already suspected. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.